Hi guys, Westy here, and this is my first video for my new Starcraft 2 channel. This channel is going to be dedicated to only Starcraft 2 content, and more specifically, Legacy of the Void Starcraft 2 content. It's also really only going to be Terran stuff on here. I'd like to make some Protoss and Zerg videos, but I haven't played the races enough yet in Legacy of the Void to be able to offer any real insight or opinion that would be of any value to anyone. Now, before we get started on this video, I'd just like to talk a little bit about why I'm only doing Legacy of the Void content and why I'm not doing any Heart of the Swarm stuff. I think a lot of people out there are like me and are a little bit disappointed with Blizzard over the course of StarCraft 2's lifetime. They seem to have made a lot of poor choices with their game design, and they never really end up listening to the community input on it, or rather they do listen, but they just don't act upon it. Things have gone a little bit better in Legacy of the Void beta. They're now actually telling us why they're not acting upon the things we'd like them to do, but I've still been quite pessimistic about the whole thing. But recently there was a community summit at the Blizzard headquarters, and a lot of community members went up there to see them and talk to them about things, and we've had some pretty good news come back from that. They apparently couldn't talk about the specifics of things, but one thing we were told is that they have a dedicated team for StarCraft 2 that is 100% dedicated to StarCraft 2, and most importantly, they will be staying dedicated to StarCraft 2 far after the launch. Now, to me, and I think a lot of people, this is huge news. I think a lot of us just assumed that Blizzard would release Legacy of the Void, it wouldn't really be what we wanted it to be, and then they'd make no more changes to it. There'd be a few balance updates every now and again when things got out of hand, and they'd change the map pool when it needed to between seasons. But other than that, there'd be no work done on it, and that would essentially mean StarCraft 2 would die a slow and painful death. But now they've told us that they're going to continue working on it long after release. I'm actually quite excited. I'm being a lot more optimistic about it. I've got a bit of the hype back again. Not too much because it's still Blizzard, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what they're going to do. Now though, Blizzard need data in the beta. Blizzard need as many of us as possible playing Legacy of the Void, experimenting with the new units, creating a new meta and then breaking that meta. They need us to find out what's broken, what's underpowered, what needs to be changed and what needs to be designed from the ground up. But I don't think there's enough Legacy of the Void content out there right now. A lot of people don't seem to be playing it, barely anyone's streaming it, and no one really talks about it apart from the few balance updates that Blizzard release. So, with that in mind, I'm going to try to create some new content to try and not only, inspire people to play Legacy of the Void more, but to try and also inspire some new and creative play with the units. So I've created this video to talk about the Liberator a little bit. Now, I have to point out this isn't a guide. I haven't been using the Liberator long enough to actually create a guide. There's a lot of better players out there than me right now that would probably be able to do a lot better with it than I could. So this is really just me showcasing how I've been using the Liberator, talking about it a bit, about where it succeeds and where it fails, and then hopefully I can get some input from you guys, some suggestions on other things I could try with it, maybe even some replays from some of you who've been using it in different, unique but successful ways, and hopefully we can really get to the grips with this new and interesting unit. Anyway, I've been talking for way too long, so let's get into it. I'm just going to talk about the Liberator's numbers and stuff a little bit for those who don't know. Here it is. I think it's a beautiful looking unit. I know there's a lot of people there who don't agree, but I think it's a good looking unit. It has a 4.72 movement speed, which, as a number might not mean much, but it's a pretty fast unit. It's not as fast as a Mutalisk or a Phoenix, but it's faster than most things. It will get away from a Viking quite easily. It also has 180 health, which means it's quite tanky. Not the tankiest unit in the world. It will still lose in a fight to a Viking, as I'll try to demonstrate in a little bit, but it can take a few hits before going down. In the recent patch, they changed it so the air-to-ground attack now only requires an armory to use. You don't need an armory to get this unit out. It can be produced from the starport straight away. It can even be produced from the starport with a reactor. So it's pretty easy to get. It does cost 150 mils and 150 gas, which is quite expensive. But as long as you get the armory, you can use its air-to-ground mode, which does a lot of damage. It cannot attack static buildings though. I mean, it will two-shot a Marauder and a Hellbat, and it will kill a Thor in I think 5 hits, but you cannot attack turrets or Spore or cannons with it. So you're not going to win a game with the Liberator. You might kill all the units, but you won't be able to kill the buildings, and it will get hard countered by static defense. It does have a massive range though. I think the range is 15, and that, I presume, includes its area of effect circle thing. So that will outrange most static defense. Well, it will outrange all static defense. It will outrange Thor. It will outrange Vikings. It will outrange Queens. So it's got a big range on it. It does lose in a straight up fight though to air units. It doesn't have the biggest air to air attack damage. I think it's only 7 per hit. I mean, it's still pretty close, but a Viking is always going to beat a Liberator one-on-one. And even in large groups, it will also beat them. The Liberator, however, does have big air splash damage. I'm going to try to put a clip in here to show you. Sadly, there's no unit tester yet in the beta, so I'm just going to show you a clip of what they do against Mutalisk in a game I played against earlier against Zerg. Now this is only 4 of them, and they're not that clumped up, but just 2 shots and those Mutalisks are almost dead. 3 shots and they would have all been gone. The Mutalisks are faster, so they get away, but just those 2 volleys from the 4 Liberators did, well yeah, look how much health they're on. It pretty much destroyed them. So they do a lot of splash damage. That's pretty much all I can say on the numbers side of things. Let's actually now jump into some footage and see where this unit actually works and where it doesn't work so well. I'm going to split the clips up into 3 different sections. We're going to start with Harassment, then move on to Early Pressure and Early Pushes, and then we're going to end with Core Compositional Usage. I think when you're looking at a new unit, those are the 3 things you really want to take into account, because if it works for any of those 3, then it's definitely a unit you want to be using at some point in the game. First up for the Harassment category is the Tamra vs Terran matchup. Well, there's not a whole lot to say. Because the Liberator Harassment is hard countered by a Viking, there's not really going to be much potential to use the Liberator as a Harassment unit in this matchup. Every Tamra vs Terran game pretty much results in early starport play, and if that happens, it's not going to take them long to get a Viking out and push away your Liberator. So in this situation, I'm always going to pick a Cloak Banshee over a Viking, because you can dodge scans, you can force scans, you can pick off Marines, and you can still pick off SCVs while dodging turrets. But with the Liberator, you're going to be forced away straight away. So I don't really think we're ever going to see Liberator used as a Harassment unit in Terran vs Terran. The only time I was able to ever use it even moderately successful was when my opponent somehow accidentally rallied their Viking straight into my main, and then they ended up getting killed by my turret and Marines. So yeah. Next up is Terran vs Protoss, and with this one I was a little bit more successful than Terran vs Terran. Some maps have abusable terrain where you can pretty much just sit behind the mineral lines with your Liberator, and you can usually hit at least some of the probes whilst outranging the Nexus cannon, and if the map has really abusable terrain, you can also pretty much outrange Stalker shots. However, it wasn't that effective. It's very heavy on the multitasking, and if you're trying to defend at home whilst doing this, which you usually will be against Protoss right now, they're all doing Adept Harass, it's very difficult to actually pick off a good number of probes because they can just run them away to their natural, and it's very difficult trying to keep moving around with your Liberator whilst dodging Stalker shots and Nexus cannon shots. And even if this did get popular, Protoss would just start going Stargate builds, and this would pretty much straight up hard counter this. So I don't think this is really going to be a thing in the future. However, it was definitely possible to use it as a Harassment unit. I didn't particularly like it, it wasn't that effective, but maybe if someone comes up with a few new interesting and different ways to use it, it might be viable. Next up we have Terran vs Zerg, and it was a lot better in this matchup. You can pretty much use it on any map, even if it doesn't have any abusable terrain, but it ends up becoming a little dance between Queens and Spore Crawlers and your Liberator's air-to-ground targeting mode. You'll end up putting it down somewhere, and the Queens will move to the side and attack it, and they'll move Spores underneath it, then you have to unsiege it and move somewhere else, and it's very heavy on the multitasking, and I didn't really find it that effective. In those situations, I'd just prefer to go Cloak Banshee. But on maps with abusable terrain, like the third on Bridgehead that you're seeing now, it's incredibly powerful. You can just park it above that little cliff, the little ledge there, and you can shoot the drones in the mineral line, and the Queens can't reach it. If the Queens want to kill it, they have to go all the way around to the back of the mineral line, which if they haven't spread creep there, will take a long time. So yes, it's definitely possible to use this as a Harassment unit in Terran vs Zerg, but personally I'd only really want to use it if there was abusable terrain. Now we're going to move on to early pushes and early aggression. I'm going to start with Terran vs Terran again because there's not a lot for me to say about it. The clip you're seeing now is the only time I really managed to make the Liberator work in an early push. I did the usual siege tank Viking push where you use air control to try and push back your opponent's siege tanks and slowly push upon their natural or their main or whatever. But Vikings are just better for this. In the clip you're seeing, I do actually win the game with this push, even though I screw up my Viking control and accidentally land them and lose most of them. But I won because I had the air control with my Vikings. The Liberators didn't really make a difference. I still would have won this game with the Vikings. And if they had built more Vikings than I had Vikings, my Liberators wouldn't have changed that. I would have lost. So it really comes down to whether you have more Vikings than them. And the Liberator doesn't really have much impact on that. So I was unable to make the Liberator really work in any kind of early aggression in Terran vs Terran. It does seem possible, maybe. I think I saw Crank playing as Terran, trying to do a Hellbat Liberator early push against other Terrans. It seemed quite powerful when he was doing it, but I didn't really see it being that successful. I guess it's something people have to experiment with a bit more. Terran vs Protoss next, and although I haven't been able to make it work, I think it does have potential. The problem with early pushes in this matchup has always been because of the photon overcharge. It outranges siege tanks, it will push back marines. It's really hard to do an early push against Protoss right now. What I was trying to achieve in the clip you're seeing was to get the Protoss to use its Nexus overcharge, and then use my Medivac to lift my units into the main, and then use the Liberator to pretty much lock down the ramp so that they couldn't come back up it. However, the problem was Adepts can just phase through the Liberator attack and siege tank attacks without taking damage by using their ghost thing, and then they just teleport on top of your siege tanks and focus them down. The clip you're seeing now was the closest I ever came to being successful with this build, and even then the Protoss held it with ease. I mean, it looks close at times, but he was holding it so easily he managed to take a third during all of this. However, I just get the feeling that it can be made to work. It seems like a very powerful combination, and I think I need to fiddle around with it, practice a bit more, maybe get some input from you guys on what I should do. But I do have hopes for this, and I'm going to keep trying it. TVC now, and it's a lot more promising, this matchup. In fact, it's more than just promising, it might even be a little bit overpowered. If you combine the Liberator with Hellbats in your early push, it's incredibly powerful. If you're on a map that has a choke point for the third base, the Zerg pretty much cannot take it early if you do this build, because you use your Liberator to put down your area to ground attack on the choke, and you use your Hellbats just to focus down the third, and if they want to defend that third, they have to run through that damage, and it will 2 or 3 shot, I think 2 shot Queens, it will 2 shot Roaches. It does a lot of damage. You can even take your third during all of this. It's not an all-in by far. You can build up your economy whilst destroying theirs, and if they go Mutilus to try and counter this, then Liberators are a great counter to Mutilus on their own. You will have to combine them with turrets, maybe a Thor, maybe some Marines, but they do so much splash damage to Mutilus that a early Mutilus build won't just straight up counter this. It's so powerful that I don't think Zergs can take an early third now on most maps. They'll have to either tech to Mutilisks or to Corruptors or to Hydras or to something to deal with these Liberators before they can take that third, otherwise they're just going to lose it if anyone does a Liberator push. Every time I've done this build, I either kill the third or I make them spend so much money on Roaches and Queens that end up just getting picked off. They end up being so far ahead that I usually end up winning the game. So definitely powerful. I expect because of this alone it might end up being nerfed a little bit. We'll have to wait and see. Now we're going to move on to core composition usage, and we'll start with Tamra vs Terran, but all you should be seeing right now is a sad face. Why are you seeing a sad face? Because as a Bio-Terran player, I haven't been able to get any footage of me using the Liberator in the Terran vs Terran matchup. When you're playing Bio vs Bio, Stim Marines are too quick for it, and you're always really going to want siege tanks. And that combined with the fact that you want to be using your starport to build Medivacs and not Liberators, is just not a very useful unit as a Bio-Terran in Terran vs Terran. There might be a bit of usage for it against meching players. If you can use Bio to gain the economic advantage and gain more gas than them, then you will be able to outproduce them in terms of air army, and if you get the air control then you can use Liberators. But I wasn't able to get any footage of this because games would usually end before then. I'd either win overwhelmingly or I'd get crushed overwhelmingly. There's definitely a place for Liberators in Tamra vs Terran mech compositions. The only problem is I suck at mech. I'm really not a mech player, I'm a Bio player, so I haven't been able to get you any footage to watch it, but I'm going to try. After this video I'm going to make a Cyclone video, and then after that I'm probably going to try redo this video, but with all the updated information that I've got, all the new games that I've played, and I'm going to try put some more effort into being a better mech player so I can get some clips for this. Really, that unhappy face is there because it looks as though Bio isn't going to have a place in Terran vs Terran anymore. You can still win with Bio, but it always requires your opponent screwing up. I think at the higher levels it's just not going to be possible for people to go Bio anymore because mech armies are just too powerful. But this is just me speculating, and I'm not the best player in the world. Maybe some better players will be able to use the new drop upgrade that Terrans have got to really put lots of pressure on meching players and force them out of the game before they get too ahead with their army. I also want to point out quickly that everything I've been showing you in this video right now, it's as a bio player. You can definitely mech now in Legacy of the Void. You can mech against Zerg, you can mech against Protoss, but as someone who's crap at mech, I haven't been using that for my compositions, for my footage. I should really have put this in the beginning, but I just want to take the opportunity now to mention, even though you're only seeing me go bio in these videos, you can mech. It's definitely possible. Tamra vs Protoss now, and I'm very excited about the Liberator in this matchup and the changes that it will bring. It can be used with a bio army to make some very interesting engagements. The footage you're seeing right now, I took so many storms to the face that I should lose the fight. In fact, I do lose the fight. But thanks to the Liberator, I'm able to close that margin. I keep some of the Liberators alive, and then I can use those Liberators to hold the choke point near my third base to stop the Protoss just pushing in and winning. Although I wasn't able to do it, I also think you can combine Liberators with drops. I believe if there's maps where there's an exposed ramp near some dead airspace, you could do a big doom drop into the main of the Protoss, and then just use the Liberator to control that ramp, and then the Protoss is either going to have to overcommit to defend their main, in which case you can then push their third, or they're going to lose most of their units walking up that ramp. It's great for area control against Protoss, it's great in straight up engagements. I'm really excited to play around with this a bit more and see what ways we can use this. I'd love to see some footage of people using this with drops. I think it's going to be a brilliant unit to watch, and it's going to change this matchup a lot. And last but not least, let's look at how this can be used against Zerg in the core composition usage. There's really two ways a Zerg can play right now. They're either going to go for Mutalings and Banelings, or they're going to go for Roach, Hydra and Lurkers. Surprisingly enough, the Liberator is actually usable against both these compositions. Although against Mutaling, Baneling, it's not very good against the ground units, it really does decimate the Mutalist count. Whenever you take an engagement, it just shreds the Mutalist apart, and it will scare that player from using their Mutalists anymore. They will not want to engage you with those Mutalists, they may even stop producing them. So it's definitely a very impactful unit against Mutaling Baneling players. They will also eventually want to tech up to Ultralisks, and as a bio player you have to have tech against Ultralisks now. The 8 armor and the minor nerf to Marauders, you cannot straight up bio against Ultralist play. And I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but I do think Liberators are going to be good against Ultralisks. The reason I haven't had a chance to use it yet is because I always win against Zerg before they get to Ultralisks when I'm using Liberators. But I'd love to see how that plays out in the future. Now when a Zerg goes for Roach, Hydra, Lurkers, the Liberator is even more useful. It's so good at ground control, it will one-shot a Hydra. I think this is going to be changed, I think the damage is going to be reduced. But right now, they just cannot push in against you when you've got Liberators and Siege Tanks up. So you can use this to gain so much ground and force them into engagements that they don't want to take, and it's incredibly cost efficient against this composition. In the clip you're seeing, I ended up winning the game because he just ended up leaving out of frustration, because every fight he would take, he would get destroyed and I'd be left with my tech units still alive. My Siege Tanks and my Liberators would be still alive after the fight, and it just allowed me to keep pushing him back, and it was just brilliant. The only downside is, right now Parasitic Bomb is incredibly powerful. Maybe a little overpowered, I'm not sure. But Liberators, if you have them clumped up against Zerg who's gone to Hive and has Parasitic Bomb, your Liberators will just die. And with those gone, your ground army is going to be a lot weaker because you will rely on the Liberators to hold the ground. But either way, I'm definitely going to be using a lot of Liberators right now against Zerg. They work really well against both compositions, and that's only after playing with them for a little while. I think there's a lot more that can be done with them. They're okay for harassing, they're great for early pushes, and they're great in the core composition. So against Zerg, Liberators are definitely useful. Alright, that's it for this first video. It's been a bit longer than I'd liked, but Liberator is a very diverse unit. I think there was a lot to talk about. There's a lot more to talk about, but I haven't had enough practice with it yet to really go into any more depth with it, I don't think. I'd love to get some feedback from you guys on this first video. Tell me what you like, what you didn't like. More importantly, I'd love to get you guys talking a little bit about the Liberator. Tell me ways you think I should use it. Tell me of your experiences with it. If you can, send me some replays. If you're a decent player and you've got some decent footage that might be useful for one of my videos, I'm going to leave an email in the description section of this video. Just send it in to me and I'll probably use it in my next Liberator video. If this video gets even 1 or 2 new people experimenting with the Liberator, trying to use it, talking about it, then I'm going to be happy with it. So if you like it, make sure to like the video. If you dislike it, make sure to dislike it. If you want to see more of this kind of thing, then make sure to subscribe, because this channel is going to only be for Legacy of the Void content. You're not going to get anything else on here. It's going to be mostly Terran content. I might go through some build orders later on when I'm a bit better at the Legacy of the Void build orders. My next video is going to be about the Cyclone. After that, I might try and do a video including the drop upgrade, the battle cruiser changes, the cloak banshee changes, everything that's changed for Terran in Legacy of the Void. I'm going to try and get some footage of it to show how it can be used and try and get people talking about it. So that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it helpful.